How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chavav, Daf 26, Daf 26, Daf Yudke Vavke of Masechta Shevuos. Friends, your friends. Yeah, okay, let's do it. Right? Yes, let's do it. Alright. We are gonna start all the way at the top of Daf Chavav Mud Aleph. I've got a coffee companion to eat. Chaim. Okay. Rabbi Shmuel Omer in Chayv Ela al Osid Lavoy. Says Rabbi Shmuel at the very top of Daf Chavav Mud Aleph. I'm gonna roll up my sleeves. Maybe I will pause the video so that you don't have to wait while I roll up my sleeves, although if I take long enough to let you know that I'm going to pause the video, then that might actually be enough time to actually roll up the sleeves. Then I don't actually need to pause anything. Okay. So now, Rabbi Shmuel Omer says Rabbi Shmuel, so as we know from the Mishnah and even from early on in the Masechta, Rabbi Shmuel's opinion is that when it comes to Shevuos Bitoy, so you're only chayiv on future, ochal v'lo ochal, not ochalti v'lo ochalti. Rabbi Akiva argues that you're also chayiv for ochalti v'lo ochalti. I'm going to eat a little bit of coffee. So here we go. There's a bee in the house. It's been here for a few days. It's pretty chilled, but I don't know how to get it out. I've been leaving out some open honey jars, hoping that it would want to eat some honey, and then I can quickly close it and remove it. But it hasn't been attracted to the honey. I thought bees apparently are attracted to honey. I got a mosquito in there. That was nice. Got that out of the house. It's not a bad trick. This mosquito in the house, you just leave an open jar of honey. Mosquito goes in, close it up, take it outside, sees it, and trying to chase it around the house. Alright. Tana Rabbanon. Lehora lehetiv. So says the Gemara, lehora or lehetiv, that the Pasuk says that if a person makes a Shevuos Bitoy, lehora lehetiv, to bad or to good. Any other dvarim sheyesh ben hara ve'atova. So says the Braise that, okay, all I know from this is things that have gooding and badding. What if they're just kind of like pariv? For example, as Rashi says, that I'll throw a rock into the sea. Who cares? I will eat salad. I won't eat poison. Like, okay, these are like important things, right? So but like, I'll throw a rock into the sea, like, who cares? So, all I know from the Haro Lehetiv is, the things that like actually could be good and bad. I guess technically the Haro would probably be, I won't eat salad. The Lehetiv, technically I guess would be to eat salad, and Lahara would be to not eat salad, because eating salad is good, not eating salad is bad. But like, yeah, throwing a rock into the sea, who cares? Okay. Where am I? How do I know? Talmud Lomer. Oh, nefesh ki si shova levate bisvosai. Okay, that is like mikol makom, like any kind of shua, even if it's not necessarily good or bad. In the elo lehabo l'shav minayin, all I know is future, right? Lehara, lehativ, to do good in the future, to do bad in the future. Ochal v'lo ochal. How do I know past tense as well? Ochalti v'lo ochalti. Tamilomer lechol asher yivate odem b'shvua divrei b'kiva. Lechol asher yivate odem b'shvua. Anything, even if it's past tense. That is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Shmuel, Lahara lehetiv lehaba. Rabbi Shmuel says, meh. Lahara lehetiv is future tense, and that is it. No past tense. Ochal v'lo ochal, not ochalti v'lo ochalti. Omar loy Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says to Rabbi Shmuel, Im kain, ein li elo dvarim sheish ben hatav v'ara. Well, if you're going to be so strict in your interpretation that lahara le'etiv davka means future, well then, argues Rabbi Akiva to Rabbi Shmuel, that you, Rabbi Shmuel, should then also say that lahara le'etiv means literally lahara le'etiv, but she'ezok tzor layam, which is kind of parv, neither good nor bad, should not be a shvuah, should be excluded. How would you know to include Rabbi Shmuel dvarim she'ein ben hara v'atava like ezrok tzur aliyam? Amalo meriboy akasu, because of the riboy of the pasuk. I guess let's say michal she'ivate adam b'shvuah, from the riboy of the pasuk. We're going to get more into detail in just a few moments. Because there's a riboy, because the pasuk is inclusive, so it includes even ezrok tzur layam. Amar lo. So Rabbi Akiva says to Rabbi Shmuel, "Im riba kasuv lichach, riba kasuv lichach," and says Rabbi Akiva, yes. It says Rabbi Akiva to Rabbi Shmuel, yes. If you're going to say that there's a riboy, to say that it includes even she'ezok tzor layam, even things that are neither good nor bad, well then it should also come to include past tense. That is Rabbi Akiva's argument. I am going to eat a little bit more coffee. Frek de Gemure. The Gemara now asks, Shaper Kamal Rabbi Akiva Rabbi Shmuel. No, Rabbi Akiva is taka freaking good. He says good. Taka. What's that? Rabbi Akiva is taka saying good. No, Rabbi Shmuel, if you're going to include things that are not strictly the relative, so you should also include things that are past tense. So, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, says Rabbi Yechanan, Rabbi Yishmael, Sheshimesh es Rabbi Nechunye ben Akana, Shayadarish es kol atera kula bichlal ufrat, Yunami darish bichlal ufrat, Rabbi Akiva, Sheshimesh es Nochmish gamzu, Shayadarish es kol atera kula beriba umiet, Yunami darish riba umiet. Gewaldig. So the Gemara says something amazing. It was interesting, Chav. It was interesting. I'll tell you something interesting. The other week, so I went to shul on Erev Shabbos. I went to shul Friday night, and I saw that they had the pamphlet, the Neflos pamphlet from Yitzchak Ginsburg, and I was flipping through it. I didn't get to the real in-depth shiurim. I was just standing there in the shul, and I flipped back to there's a Sipur Chasidi. This one was talking about Reb Meir Balanes, but Reb Meir, went to Reb Meir on Pesach. That was gewaldig. We're going to get to the story of Eloya to Reb Meir Aneni in Masechet Avodah Zarah, I believe. Akoponim. So there was an intro. There was they give a little bit of a biography there of whoever the story is about. So this was about Reb Meir, and there were all these little tidbits about Reb Meir. Chevra, I knew where all of them were from. It was like this. Oh yeah, it's the Gemara in Eruvin. This is, oh yeah, it's the Gemara in Pesachim. Oh yeah, it's Mishnah in Sota. That is what else did they quote from? Chagiga. Keilu. They just in the introduction, every bit of it, except for one detail, the first detail, but other than that, pretty much every detail that they had about Reb Meir's life, I knew exactly where to find it in the Gemara. So here's another one of these things that Rabbi Shmuel, who is Rabbi Shmuel's Rebbe? Imagine there was a story about Rabbi Shmuel, and they would say he was a student of Rabbi Nechunye ben Akana. Shevuos, Daf Chav Vav. If you had an introduction, if you had a bio of Rabbi Akiva, so he was a student of course, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, but also Nochmish Gamzu. How do you know he's a student of Nochmish Gamzu? Shevuos, Daf Chav Vav. Eat a little bit more coffee. Okay, so it says the Gemara that Rabbi Shmuel Sheshimesh es Nechunye ben Akane. Rabbi Shmuel, who is a Talmud of Rabbi Nechunye ben Akane, She'edorish is called Hatere Kule Bechlal Ufrat, that Rabbi Nechunye ben Akane. So we learned the other day I believe it was with Rebbe toward the beginning of the Masechta, that there's like different ways, and it seems like different Tanoim basically. There's Klal Ufrat Uchlal, there's Riboy Umiyit V'Riboy, right? We've seen these concepts before, and it's like a different, I guess, perspective on how to darshan to learn psukim. Some Tanoim, when they viewed a pasuk, when there was a Klal Ufrat Uchlal kind of thing, they would view it from the prism of Klal Ufrat Uchlal, and others would see the same setup and say this is Riboy Umiyut V'Riboy. It was just a different way of what do you do when you have this scenario, inclusive, like broad, specific broad. Is that a Klal Ufrat Uchlal, or is it a Riboy Umiyut V'Riboy? Right? There, of course, are differences, as we're going to see now and as we've seen many times in the past. So Rabbi Shmuel was a Talmud of Rabbi Nechunya ben Akono. Now Rabbi Nechunya ben Akono, Shayadorish Kol HaTorah Kula B'Chlal Ufrat. Rabbi Nechunya ben Akono, when he would see these sort of templates, he would say this is a Klal Ufrat Uchlal. Yunami Dorish B'Chlal Ufrat. So therefore, Rabbi Shmuel also Darshan's Klal Ufrat. Rabbi Akiva, Shashimesh es noch mish gamzu, Shayadorish es Kol HaTorah Kula B'Riboy Umiyet, Yunami Deresh Riboy Umiyet. So therefore, Rabbi Akiva Ochet, who excuse me, this is going to be noisy for a second. So Rabbi Akiva Ochet, so Rabbi Akiva, what was the Talmud of Nachmish Gamzu would view these as Riboy Umiyuts. So Rabbi Akiva Ochet darshaned Kacha as Riboy Umiyut. My Rabbi Akiva knows to tell me more. What's with Rabbi Akiva? Riboy Umiyut. Tell me more. The Darish Riboy. So my Rabbi Akiva the Darish Riboy Umiyut. The Sanya, as we learned in the Brisa. O nefesh kisi shava riba. Right, a person who swears. Okay, pretty broad. Any kind of a swear. Lahar or lahetiv, bad and good. Miyet, that's a miyut. So it's specifically bad and good. L'chol asher yivate adam. Then it says all the things that a person will express. Chazer v'riba. That's another riboy. Riba umiyet v'riba. So that is riboy, miut, riboy, riba hakol. My riba kol mila, it includes all the things. My miyet dvar mitzvah. What's excluded? A dvar mitzvah, making right shvua levata less a mitzvah, or lekaimis mitzvah shvua about a mitzvah. Meaning, as we've seen before, right, the way that the riboy, when there's a riboy and a miut, basically it includes everything except for one thing. Like, okay, should I explain this now? Maybe, why not? That's not a bad idea. Basically, okay, if you look at, basically, let's compare riboy, and we've done this before. I'm kind of like, I don't know if I should get into this, but I feel like it might be good to have a refresher. I feel like it could take a few times. I feel like it's always good to have a refresher on this. What, is everybody clear on what the difference is between riboy, miut, and klal ufrat? Should I just assume that everybody knows it? Should I go weiter? I feel like a refresher is good, right? I feel like there's at least probably one person who wants a refresher. If you know it already, just skip it, I guess. But basically, if we do like a quick comparison between klal ufrat and riboy miut, so klal ufrat and riboy miut basically, or let's start with riboy miut versus klal ufrat, just because that's the order that we're learning them now. Basically, riboy and miut and klal ufrat start out the same, right? You start with a riboy, you start with a klal. They both start with the same. It includes everything, right? In this case, it says nefesh kisi shava, a swear. That's anything, okay? Klal ufrat and riboy miut start out the same. But where they start to differ is once you get to that prat, in this case, / mute. In this case, leharo lehetiv. The question is, what does that mean? So when you're a riboy umute kind of way of viewing things, that miut, leharo lehetiv, is coming to include all things that are similar to lahara o lehetiv, whatever that might be. Maybe that's future, all future Shevuos. But basically, when you see that specific, it's saying, okay, it's not all Shevuos, but it's only Shevuos that are similar to lahara o lehetiv, where that's riboy umiut. Klal ufrat would say it's limiting it only to lahara o lehetiv. Only things that literally would fit under the umbrella of lahara lehetiv, right? To the exclusion of Zorak Tzor Liam, right? Also, it would probably have to be future tense, nothing in the past tense. So, Ribu Miut, the Miut is, so again, but Klal Ufrat and Ribu Miut both start off from the same place with this Klal, which includes everything. But once you start limiting it, they're different. Ribu Miut, that limitation is limiting it to all things that are similar to the limitation, whereas Klal Ufrat is saying it's limited only to that limitation, not anything similar, nothing only to that. Now, there's then there's the next broad thing, right, which in this case is l'chol asher yivate adam b'svasav. So when you're riboy and miut, the miut already included things that are similar to the miut, right? When you're learning riboy and miut, we said, right, lahar leitiv is things that are similar to lahar leitiv. So when it says l'chol asher yivate adam, what's that inclusive coming thing to now include? We already included things that are similar to lahar leitiv. We're including actually everything, all kinds of Shevuos. Well, then what was the point of the miut? It's going to exclude just one thing. When you have riboy or miut or riboy, you include everything. The point of the miut only comes to exclude just one thing. And in this case, we're saying that it's Shevuos related to mitzvahs. That's what's being excluded. If you say klal ufrad uchlal, remember we started with the klal, then we said lahar lehetiv, which is limiting it only to lahar lehetiv. Nothing similar to lahar lehetiv. Lahar lehetiv alone. Then when you have l'chol asher yivate adam, it's coming to include things similar to lahar lehetiv. Basically the equivalent of the miut, right? So basically klal ufrad uchlal, if I'm not mistaken, is basically the same thing as ribu miut. With that, like when you have a klal ufrat uchlal, where you end up at the end of klal ufrat uchlal is where you end up after riboy umiut without the extra riboy. Okay, basically klal ufrat uchlal, right? Yatadon ela ke'ein haprat, things that are similar to the prat. Okay, I hope that was a clear explanation, and I hope that it was necessary too. Maybe Cheveh, if I'm beating a dead horse over here, like if every time we get to klal ufrad uchlal, you don't want me to kind of do a refresher, maybe write to me in WhatsApp and say, Shirley, no more refreshers. I'm going to need more coffee. Alright, so now, my Rabbi Akiva, I'm on the last of the thin lines. My Rabbi Akiva dodars riboy umiute. What's this opinion of Rabbi Akiva who's darshaning riboy and miut? Desanya. O nefesh kisishava riba. When it says nefesh kisishava, any kind of shvuah. Laharo lehetiv. Then when you have laharo lehetiv mi'et, right? That's a miut. It's coming to limit it to things that are similar to laharo lehetiv. Lechol ashevat adam chazav riba. But then when it says lechol ashevat adam, it's coming to include everything, all Shevuos. Riba umiet v'riba riba akol. It includes all Shevuos. My riba kol mile. It includes everything. Umay miet devar mitzvah. So it's the one thing that is excluded by the miut. Mitzvahs. Shevuos about mitzvahs are excluded. Okay. Right. A Shevuos bitoy about a mitzvah is irrelevant, as we're going to learn. Where are we going to learn this? Oh. Tomorrow. Mitzvah. Okay. Now, Rabbi Shmuel, Darish Klal Ufrat, whereas Rabbi Shmuel looks at this from a lens of Klal Ufrat Uchlal. O Nefesh Kisi Shava Levate Bisvasayim Klal. Okay, so again, you have the same Klal, right? Ribur Miut Ribur is just Klal Ufrat Uchlal. It's the same construct. Okay, so right, so you start off with that Klal. Lahar Lehetiv Prat. Now, lahar lehetiv, however, is a prat, meaning it's limited only lahar lehetiv, not things similar to lahar lehetiv, only lahar lehetiv. Prat. L'chol sheivate adam chazav v'chol. But when you have l'chol sheivate adam, that's the second klal ufrad uchlal, yatadon elo ke'ena prat. And when you have klal ufrad uchlal, so then where we end up with is things that are similar to the prat, things that are similar to lahara o lehetiv. Ma'aprat mefayrish lehaba. So what's similar to lahara ulehetiv? Well, it's lehaba. It's in the future. Afkol lehaba. So any future tense shevuah, will be a shvuah. but not past tense Shevuos. Things that are similar to lahar lehetiv, i.e. that they are future tense. Ahani klala le'asuye afilu dvarim she'ein ben hara'a ve'atova lehaba. Right? That the klal, what's included is things that are similar to lahar lehetiv, meaning if they're in the future. So even if it's not lahar lehetiv, right? It's ezok tzor layam. It's kind of pariv. But if it's in the future, ezok tzor layam, lo ezok tzor layam, it is a valid shvuah. Ahani prata, and what's excluded is that limute afilu dvarim sheyesh ben hara ve'atova l'sha'avar. And what's excluded is that even if you have something that's lahara le'atova, right? Eating, not eating, but if it's in the past, forget about it. It's excluded. Achalti v'lo achalti, even though it's good and bad, lahara lehetiv. If it's in the past, forget about it. Right, so it includes things in the future. It excludes things from the past that are in the past. Ipuchana, frek de gemore, maybe I'll taka say fakert, that what's included is anything that's lahara or lehetiv, even if it's in the past. And what's excluded is anything that is not lahara lehetiv, even if it's in the future. Right? Let's say that the similarity is not that it needs to be in the future. Let's say the similarity is that it needs to be lahar lehetiv. Rabbi Yitzchak dumya de lahar lehetiv, to which Rabbi Yitzchak says, yes, but the reason why future Shevuos are what's included is because it has to be similar. We're including things that are similar to lahar or lehetiv. Misha isuro mishum bal yachol devaro. That the Isser is because of Bal Yachel Devaro, right? It says Lehara, Le'ativ, Ochel, Ochav, Lo Ochal. So you better make sure, Bal Yachel Devaro, better make sure not to violate your word. That's in the future. To exclude Achalti v'lo Achalti, that is not an issue of Bal Yachel Devaro in the future, but rather Bal Tashakru, don't lie, right? If you say achalti when really you didn't eat, or lo achalti when really you did, that's not a lo yochel, that's not a, be sure not to violate what you said, too late, you already lied. So that's a different thing. So we're not talking about past tense, because that's in a matter of lying. We're talking about future, which is a matter of Bal Yochel Dvari. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Ovin, Omar says, Rabbi Yitzchak bar Ovin, Omar Kra, the Pasuk says, O nefesh kisi shova levate bisfosai, says, right, any nefesh that oaths levate bisfosai, to say something, but we want to say levate bisfosai is like an action. So kilu, the point is you have the oath and then you have the action, right? So ochal v'lo ochal, you're making a shvuah, you're making an oath that you then will take an action to eat or not to eat. Whereas if you say achalti v'lo achalti, you already took the action before the oath. Misha shvuah kodemis lebitui, that the oath must precede the proceed or precede. Dennis, can you solve this one? Can you resolve this once and for all? I think it's precede. Proceeds are like money that you make, right? Precede is to proceed, right? But can you proceed like a procession? Like, okay, proceed. Right? I think proceed would say okay, go. Okay, you can proceed. Proceeds, I think, also could be like money that you make. Like all proceeds will be donated. But to precede, this is a case of precede, right? That the shvuah must precede the action. Not that the action should precede the oath. To the exclusion of achalti v'lo achalti, because in this case it's the action that preceded the oath, but we need the oath to precede the action. Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught ha'odem b'shvuah prad le'onus. Okay, right. The pasuk is Choshe Vate Ha'adam B'Shvuah. Ha'adam B'Shvuah. You have to be an Adam at the time of Shvuah, which I guess means you have to be aware of what you're swearing about. But if you make a mistake, for example, you say Achalti, right, because you really thought that you did eat salad, I guess you must have really wanted to, you convinced yourself that you ate salad. Turns out you didn't. So, prat la'anus, that would be excluded. You would not have to bring a korban for that because you really thought you did. V'nelam, prat lemezid, and it was hidden to exclusion of if it was intentional. He intentionally violated a shvuah. Mimenu shenesalma, mimenu shvuah, that at the time that he violated the shvuah, he had forgotten about the shvuah, right? He said, I'm not going to eat salad. And he totally forgot and he ate salad. What if he forgot about the chayfetz? Now the Gemara is going to discuss what does it mean that he forgot about the chayfetz? Meaning, he's aware of the shvuah, right? He says, yeah, I know, I made a shvuah, I'm not going to eat salad, I know. So what does he, but he's not aware that the salad in front of him is salad? Like, well, what does it mean exactly that he's aware of the shvuah, but he's not aware of the item? Somebody made the salad look like candy, but it was really salad? Like, what's going on? Okay. For forgetting about the shvuah, not for mistaking about the object. Amar Mar, we said, ha'adam b'shvuah prad la'anus. Okay, that ha'adam b'shvuah to exclusion of somebody who was honest. Herchida mihasa okay to Rav Kahana Rav Asi, for example, like Rav Kahana and Rav Asi. Kavu kaime mekame de Rav, when they got up from the shir, Rav gave a shir, and after the shir, Rav Kahana and Rav Asi got up. Mar amar shvuoso do'achi amaruv. Umar amar shvuoso do'achi amaruv. And Rav Kahana says, I swear that this is what Rav said, and Rav Asi says, I swear that is what Rav Kahana, what Rav said. Ki also the kame de Rav amar kechad minayu, and then when they were in front of Rav said like one of them and not like the other one. So amar leidachs, and the other one who was wrong said, well, I just swore about it. So v'ana b'shikra ishtaboi, did I just swear falsely? Amle libcha anoscha. Rav says, your heart honest you. You thought that you were swearing truthfully, and therefore you don't need to, you're not in violation of anything there. Azoy. That's kind of interesting. What would that be? What kind of a shvuah is that? Because there's no action there. He's just swearing that he's right. That's interesting. Did this come up, that shvuah that, I feel like did this come up? Shvuah that, there's the bee. The bee's flying around. Ooh. Yeah, it flies around, then it just lands someplace and goes to sleep for like 12 hours. Anyways, wait, did we not have something like this? Like shvuah, ploni. I feel like we had, yeah, for sure we had that. Right, there was the whole thing, right, that was all Machlokes Rav and Shmuel about you can't futurize that, what was that whole thing? That shvuah, right, that you were unable to, was it even yesterday's stuff? Yeah. Oh wow. Shvuah shezarak ploni tzur layam. That's actually interesting. It's funny because it's Machlokes Rav Shmuel. So Rav Taka says you'd be chay. Well, that's geschmack. It was yesterday's daf. I recorded yesterday's daf on Friday. It's already Monday right now, so I didn't remember. But that's actually really geschmack. So in the scenario of Shavuos Shazarak Ploni Tzur Layam, Rav Taka says that you're chayiv for that. So also I guess so this same Shavuot that Rav said this. So it makes sense that there was a shayla, would he be chayiv or not? Because after all, Rav would say that you would be chayiv in that scenario. Okay. Where are we? V'nelam, so now, we had said v'nelam mimenu, shenis'ala mimenu shvuah, that he was unaware at the time of the shvuah. Yochel shenis'ala mimenu chayfetz, what if he was unaware about the chayfetz? Tamulam b'shvuah v'nelam mimenu alelam shvuah, chayvenu chayv alelam chayfetz, as we learned a few minutes ago. Machaku ale b'mayrovet. They laughed about it in Mayrove in Eretz Yisrael. Now, there's this, the Mesoras Hashas points us to that Yud Zayin Amud Beis of Masechta Sanhedrin, where there's all those like things such as who, when it says Machaku Alei b'Mayrova, who is that? So the Gemara in Sanhedrin and that Yud Zayin Amud Beis says it's Reb Yossi Bab Chaninu. Akoponim. Bishlam Shevuos Mishkachas Lo B'Loi Chayfetz. So I understand how you can forget about the Shevuah while being aware of the Chayfetz, right? You go to eat salad, for example, and you say, wow, that looks like a Geshmaka salad. You entirely forgot that you said that you weren't going to eat salad. Or listen to what the Gemara says. Kigon, for example, the Omar Shevuah Sheloi Oichal Paschitin V'chsaver She'ochal Kamer. He had made a Shevuah, I'm not going to eat wheat bread. But he thought that he had said, I am going to eat wheat bread. And he eats wheat bread, so he's totally aware that he's eating wheat bread. He had just thought that he made a Shevuah to eat wheat bread, so he was eating wheat bread. He thought he was being Mekayim Shevuah, but actually the Shevuah was that he was not going to eat wheat bread, so he's taka in trouble. The Shevuah also, Inshe taka forgot what he had, the Shevuah that he had made. He was aware that he was eating wheat bread. He thought that he had said that he's going to eat wheat bread, not that he's not going to eat wheat bread. I don't understand how you could have forget about the chayfetz while knowing about the shvuah. Could go into Omar shvuah paschitin. For example, he says a shvuah that I'm not going to eat wheat bread. V'chsaver shel soirim ka'omar. But he thought that he had said, I'm not going to eat barley bread. That's the thing. The Shevuah also dochir, he remembered the Shevuah, just that he messed up about the object of the Shevuah, chefza inche, but he had forgotten about the object. But the Gemara says, but that's weird though, because came the chefza inche le, hanu helim Shevuah. Meaning, if we're saying that, if we want to say that Helim Chayfetz is that, well, he had made a Shevuah that he's not going to eat wheat bread, but he had thought that he had said that he's not going to eat barley bread. But that's Helim Shevuah. That's, okay, so you forgot that the Shevuah that you had made. Right? Just like we had said, if he had said Shevuah Shalo Ochal, but really he had said Shevuah Shalo Ochal, so this is just a different part of the Shevuah that he messed up about. He had thought that he said Shevuah Shalo Ochal Pas Chitin, or Pas Sorin, but it turned out they said Shevuah Shelo Ochal Pas Chitin. But at the end of the day, the fact of the matter is he messed up on what his Shevuah was about, not on the object that he's actually eating. So rather says Rabbi Elazar, Davida Achasi, rather says Rabbi Elazar, you know what, Taka isn't a distinction. Yeah, there is no situation where you only forget about the Chayfetz, but you know about the Shevuah. Rabbi Elazar says, yeah, that distinction does not actually exist. Maskeflor of Yosef, there's like different ways to say this next word. I'm going to try to read it just the way that it is. Maskeflor of Yosef, Rav Yosef asked, Alma chayfetz below shvuah lo mishkachas lo v'o mishkachas lo. Rav Yosef says, Be'etzem keilu, why are you saying that there's no possibility of forgetting about the object while remembering the shvuah? I'll tell you where it could happen. Kigon, for example, the Omar shvuah shaloi oichal paschitin. For example, if he says shvuah that I'm not going to eat wheat bread, okay, and he's aware that he made a shvuah that he's not going to eat wheat bread. Okay, he says I'm not going to eat wheat bread. He sticks his hand into the basket to pull out a loaf of barley bread. Also biyado shalchitin. And sure enough, what did he pull out? A wheat bread. But he thought he was pulling out a barley bread. And he thought that it was barley bread, but it turns out that it was wheat bread, va'achla, and he ate it. The shvuah dachile, he was aware of his shvuah, I'm not going to eat wheat bread. Chefza udelo, yodale, it was just that the object, there was a mistake with the object. He thought that it was barley bread, which was allowed. Turns out that it was wheat bread. So while he's entirely aware of the shvuah, it was the object that he messed up about. Now, Abaye asked a kasha. There's like two versions of his kasha. I don't really understand the distinction between them. It's kind of like subtle. But anyways, Omale Abaye says to Rav Yosef, Klum michayeves le korban elo amayde tofis biyadeh. To which Abaye says, yeah, but the korban that a person needs to bring for a korban Shevuos bitoy is because of what's in his hand, helem shvuahu, and for that it would be helem shvuah. Let's go weiter. Lishna acharina. There's another way to understand Abaye. Abaye says to Rav Yosef, sof at the end of the day, korban de kamaisi Allah dehai pas, that the korban that you would bring is for this bread, mias helem shvuahu. It's helem shvuah. I think that essentially what Abaye is saying in both phrases. I think it's essentially the same thing, just phrased slightly differently, I think. But anyways, I think what Abaye is challenging Rav Yosef is, so Rav Yosef had said, look, he remembers the shvuah, right? He says, I'm not going to eat wheat bread. He's totally aware of that. The mistake was with the barley bread, that the mistake was with the barley bread. Right? He thought he was eating barley bread. Turns out it was wheat bread. So the mistake was with the object, not with the shvuah. Abaye was sort of planting the seeds for a yid many generations later named Albert Einstein. He was planting the seeds of the law of relativity. And Abaye said, look, it's all relative. From the perspective of the shvuah, yeah, he was aware of the shvuah. It was the object that he messed up about. But from the perspective of the object, when he picked up that barley bread, when he had picked up that wheat bread, and he thought it was barley, but now he has the wheat, he had messed up about the shvuah, i.e., he thought that there was no shvuah on this bread that he has in his hands, but it turns out that there actually was a shvuah about this bread. So from the perspective of the bread that he's holding in his hands, he's making a mistake about the shvuah because he's thinking that regarding the bread that he has in his hand, there's no shvuah preventing him from eating it, but it turns out that there is a shvuah preventing him from eating it. So from that perspective, it's a mistake about whether there's a shvuah that's relevant or not. So you can argue that that's a shvuah issue, not a chayfetz issue. Okay, fine. Where am I? Rav Yosef would respond to that, Kevin de chiyadole de chitin hu parishmine elam chayfetzu. To which Rav Yosef argues back. He says, look, I mean, if you would tell him, hey, you do realize that you have a wheat bread in your hand, not a barley bread, he would say, oh, I better put that down because I know that I shouldn't be eating wheat bread. Since he would put it down if he was made aware of it, that proves, says Rav Yosef, that it's the object that he's unaware of. He's totally aware of the shvuah. It's the object that he's unaware of. If you make him aware of the object, he would put it down because he's aware that based on the shvuah, he shouldn't be eating that bread. So therefore, it's entirely a lapse vis-a-vis the chayfetz, not vis-a-vis the shvuah. I'm going to eat a little bit more coffee. Okay, now says the Gemure, Ba'amine Rav Rav Nachman. Rav asked Rav Nachman, like he asked Rav Nachman on Daf Yud Tes. Similarly, Helem zevoza b'yodomau. What if there's a double helem? What if he is unaware of the shvuah and he's unaware of the object? Amar lei. So Rav Nachman responds, Arei helem shvuah b'yodo. Well, if he's unaware of both the shvuah and the object, so memela, that means that he's unaware of the shvuah. V'chayiv, and therefore he is chayiv. Wait, but I can argue that if he's unaware of both the shvuah and the chayfetz, that means memela that he's unaware of the chayfetz, in which case he should be you're potter for that, so you should be potter. Rashi says, Rashi Chazinon, we see imachmas shvuah kapare sharelim shvuah biyado. If we say, hey, there you made a shvuah not to eat wheat bread, and he says, oh, I better put that down. Well, then it's helem shvuah v'chayiv, and he's chayiv. Imachmas chayfetz kapar shari helem chayfetz biyado ufater. If you say, hey, you know that you're holding wheat bread, and then he puts it down, it's because that means it's helem chayfetz, and he's potter. Amalei Ravina l'Ravashi. Ravina says to Ravashi, like we saw in Daf Yud Tes, klum parish b'shvuah elem shum chayfetz, klum parish b'chayfetz elem shum shvuah ela loshna. Right. So Ravina says to Ravashi, wait, that distinction isn't really a good distinction because, if you say to the guy, hey, you made a shvuah not to eat wheat bread, he'll say, yeah, I know, but this is barley bread. In order for him to put down the bread, because you tell him, hey, you made a shvuah not to eat wheat bread, he also has to know that it is, it means also that, if he's putting it down, it means that he's also being made aware of the fact that it's barley bread. There's the bee. I guess it's looking around in the morning. It's flying around. Al Koponim. Maybe I'll put out some more honey afterwards. Al Koponim. So where are we? So anyways, so in order for him to put it down, he'd have to be aware that hey, yes, I said not to eat wheat bread. Oh, and this is also wheat bread, right? And also if you say, hey, that's wheat bread, you say, okay, if he's unaware of the shvuah, then he would be like, all right, well, I'm just going to eat it. Why not? And in order for him to put it down, it'd be because he'd be like, oh, right, I made that shvuah. So it means that it was memele, a helam of both of them. And therefore, you're going to be potter from bringing a korban shvuah. As I said on Daf Yud Tes, it doesn't exactly necessarily say why, but I think maybe it's because you don't want to be bringing chul and lazar. So therefore, we say don't bring a korban. All right, where are we? Okay. Pamina Rav Nachman. Rav asks Rav Nachman, Ezri shigigas shvuas bitui. What is shogeg when it comes to shvuas bitui l'she'ovar? Achalti v'lo achalti. How can you possibly have shogeg when it comes to achalti v'lo achalti? Because if you intentionally said achalti when really lo achalti, well then that's a shvuas sheker, right? And if you thought that you ate it, but you really didn't, we said that is odom b'shvuah, that would be onus, and you'd be potter for that. So how can you have shogeg by shvuas bitui l'sha'ovar that you'd bring a korban for? Ezu shigigas shvuas bitui l'sha'ovar. What's shigigas shvuas bitui l'sha'ovar? Either yoda mezidu. If he knew that he was not telling the truth, said achalti when he knew that lo achalti, so then it's mezid. Either lo yoda, if he didn't know, we said that would be onus. Who? So Omar Lei, so Rav Nachman responds, Be'omer Yodea Oni Sheshvua Zoi Asura. He says, look, I know that I'm not allowed to make this shvuah. He says, if I understand correctly, he says, look, I know I didn't eat salad, and I know that by swearing that I did eat salad, I know that that's a problem. But I don't know that there's a korban shvuah. I didn't know that there's a korban when it comes to shvuas. Right, so he says, I'm not allowed to make this shvuah, but he's unaware about whether or not he needs to bring a korban for this, which is interesting because he's doing it b'mezid, so there's no korban for mezid, but he doesn't know. Okay, he doesn't know. So in that case, that would be considered a shogeg. Right, so again, Amalei Rav Nachman says, "Ba'omer yodea ani sheshvua zo." So he says, look, I know that I'm not allowed to do this. I'm not allowed to swear that I ate salad, even though I know that I didn't eat salad. Aval. I don't know if I'm chayiv to bring a korban for that, or lo, or lav, or not. Kiman, who's that like? Kimunbaz. It's like munbaz. It's like munbaz. It's like munbaz. Beautiful name. Domashigigas korban shma shgoge. That munbaz says in Masechta Shabbos, back in Masechta Shabbos, way back when, probably like 5 years ago. That shigigas korban shma shgoge, that if on Shabbos you, pick an apple off the tree intentionally, but you're right, so that's mezid, but you're not sure if you'd be chayiv a korban for that, that would be considered actually shogeg. And then we say afilu tem rabbanon, and then the Gemara says actually you could say that that this is not just like mumbaz, it's actually even like the rabbanon. Now, the rabbis on Shabbos say, look, if you pluck an apple off the tree intentionally, you just don't know if you're chayiv a korban or not, that would be mezid. That's not shogeg. But that's specifically by Shabbos that it would be mezid. Ad kan lo plige rabbanon ole de munbaz, that when the rabbis argue with munbaz, when it comes to Hilchos Shabbos, el b'chol haTorah kula delav chideshu. That's by other scenarios which aren't a chiddush. But here where it's a chiddush, the b'chol Torah kula lo ashkechon lav the ma'aseh korban the afinu me'avodah zarah v'acha ma'aseh afilu rabbanim modu. That be'etzem, look, the general concept when it comes to, we'll read it again inside in a second, but be'etzem the general concept when it comes to korban chatos is that you bring a korban chatos, for something shazdono kares v'ashigasu chatos. You bring korban chatos when for something that if you do b'mezid be chayiv kares. That's the general gist. For example, for chaylev, for chilul Shabbos. So the rabbis argue, like in general cases that follow the general rule of when there's a chiyuv kares, so then there's a korban chatos, right? If there's a chiyuv kares on purpose, if you do it by accident, there's a chiyuv chatos. And Shabbos fits that definition. If you do it on purpose, chiyuv kares, by accident, it's chiyuv chatos. So the rabbis say, look, if the guy didn't know about the chiyuv chatos, well, he's still going to be chayiv kares anyways. That's not considered a shogeg. However, Shevuos Bito is unique because there's no chiyuv kares for deliberately violate. It's a lav, right? Don't lie. But there's no, if it's past tense, but there's no chiyuv kares for violating a Shevuos Bito. It's a lav, right? Lo yachol dvar, or whatever it might be. But you're violating a lav, there's no chiyuv kares, and yet, by accident, there is a korban. So that's a chiddush. So the rabbis say that even if you are unaware of the, therefore the rabbis say, since it's a chiddush, if you're unaware of whether or not you bring a korban, that's understandable, and that could be considered shogeg as well when it comes to Shevuos Bito, right? So afilu temer rabbanon, you can even say that this aligns with the rabbis, right? You can even say that shgaga for Shevuos Bito the sha'avar, when we say that's, that you're in violation of the shvuah, but you don't know if it's a chiyuv korban, you can say that even the rabbis would agree with that. Because afilu temer rabbanon adkan lo pligi rabbanon ole de munbaz el b'chol Torah kula. Look, the rabbis argue with munbaz when it comes to general cases of korbanis that follow the general rule of when there's a chiyuv kares b'mezid, so in b'shogeg there's a korban chatos, right? The lav chidushu, because there's no chiddush in those cases. Avol hacha the chidushu, but over here where there's a chiddush, the b'chol Torah kula lo ashkechan lav demaisi korban. That generally we don't find just a lav that you'd bring a korban chatos for. We learn out korbanos from avodah zarah where there's a chiyuv kares there. Here you're bringing a korban just for a lav. So afilu rabbanim modu, even the rabbis could admit that would be considered shogeg, since this is an exceptional case and you may not have known. Ba'a Mine Ravina me Rava. Ravina asks, Rava Nishba al kikar umistakin aleh. Mao. What if a person made a shvuah, I am not going to eat bread, but then he becomes dangerously ill and he mamish needs to eat bread, and then he eats bread, and he forgets about and he forgets that he made a shvuah not to eat bread, and he eats bread. He's dangerously ill and he eats bread. Would he have to bring a korban for that? Mistaken lishrele mar, to which Rava responds, well, if we're talking about where he's dangerously ill, obviously if he would have come and asked, hey, can we undo the shvuah? Obviously you would have said milichatchila that you can undo the shvuah, and therefore because it's a scenario where we would definitely be matir the shvuah, so in this case he would not bring a korban for that. Element sta'er v'achla b'shegigas shvuah mai. How about this though? What if he was just like extremely hungry? Okay, right? He said, I'm not going to eat any bread, and then he got extremely hungry, so hungry that even if you would have reminded him, hey, you made a shvuah not to eat bread, he would have said, I don't care, and he would have eaten it anyways. Now it happens to be he forgot about the shvuah, but even if he would have known, he would have eaten it anyways. That's how hungry he was. But he forgot about the shvuah. Would you bring a korban for that? Amalei Tanina, Rava says that, well, we learn in a Mishnah. Where is this from? Shabbos? I don't know. A few places. Shav mi'idioso mevi korban. In a scenario where if he would know about it, then he would refrain from doing it. So in this case, if he were to have known, hey, if somebody would have reminded him, hey, you made a shvuah not to eat bread, he would have said, all right, and he would have backed down, then maybe korban. So then you bring a korban for that when you eat it by accident because you forgot about the shvuah. Maybe korban al shigigaso. Lo shav mi'idioso, ain't maybe korban al shigigaso. However, in a scenario where even if he was reminded that he made a shvuah not to eat bread, he would have eaten the bread anyways, in this case because he's so freaking hungry. So then he doesn't. It happens to be that it was b'shogeg. He forgot about the shvuah. But even if he would have known about the shvuah, he would have eaten it anyways. He's so hungry. So even though he forgot about the shvuah, there would not be a korban. Right? Only in a scenario where if he would have known about it, he would have refrained, but he forgot about it, and therefore he did it. So then you bring a korban. But in this case, he would have, even if he would have known about the shvuah, he was so hungry that he would have violated the shvuah intentionally. It happens to be he forgot about it, but still he doesn't bring a korban shvuah for that. Amar Shmuel says Shmuel, Gamar belibo tzarich sheyotzi b'sfaso. If a person in his heart says, I'm not going to eat salad, he needs to say it. It's not enough to have it in your heart. You have to say it. Shenemar, as the Apostle says, levate b'sfasayim, to express with your lips. Meisvei, we have a contradiction, however. B'sfasayim velo balev. Okay, you have to express with your lips, not in your heart. Gomer b'libo minayim. But then the Brisa says, and how do we know that if you did express it in your heart, it would be considered a shvuah? Tamalom l'chol asher yavate ha'adam b'shvuah. Well, anything, even if it's in your heart. We say, wait a second, that's contradictory. On the one hand, the Reisha says, you said not in your heart. But then you're talking about, okay, now, if he has it in his heart, how do you know that's a valid shvuah? Well, first he says it's not a valid shvuah, then you say, oh, it's a valid shvuah, make up your mind. So if Sheshes comes to explain the Brisa in the following way. Halo kasha, it's no problem. Here's how you have to understand the Brisa. Achi kama, this is what it's saying. Bisfasayim, you have to express with your lips. V'lo shegamar belibo lohotzi bisfasa v'lo hotzi. Okay. So you have to express it with your lips to the exclusion of if you intended to express it with your lips and then you didn't. If you intended to express it with your lips, you have to express it with your lips. However, Gama Belibo Stam, if you just Stam thought in your heart, I'm not going to eat salad anymore without Davka, any intention to say it, well then, Minayin, how do you know that would be a valid Shavua? Tamlim L'chol HaShevate. So basically, if you intended to express it with your lips, you have to express it with your lips. But if you didn't intend to explicitly express it with your lips, that would be a valid Shavua. So, Ela L'Shmuel Kasha, okay, fine. We've resolved the internal contradiction in the Brisa, fine. But now, once we've resolved that Brisa, the Sefer was saying that if you made a shvuah in your heart, stam, I'm not going to eat salad, that's a valid shvuah. Shmuel, however, had said that it's not. So Amr of Sheshes says, of Sheshes, you know what, fine, Tritz ve'emachi, we can answer the Brisa in the following way, we can understand the Brisa in the following way, that is not a problem for Shmuel. Bisvasayim, that when it says with your lips, v'lo shegomar belibo lotzi paschitin v'otzi pasor. But to the exclusion of, if he had intended to say, I'm not going to eat wheat bread, but he ended up saying, I'm not going to eat barley bread. That would not be a valid shvuah. Gomar belibo lotzi paschitin v'otzi pastam minayin. And now what about if he had intended to say wheat bread, but he ended up just saying bread? How do we know that is valid? So therefore it says anything that he will say, and that would include a scenario where he intended to say wheat bread, but he just said bread. Okay, and then so we're just talking about like when he said stuff, and Shmuel is then adding, he would have to say it in your heart. It's not enough. The Brisa doesn't say anything about just in your heart alone. Meisvei, we have a contradiction. Motzos vosecha tishmor ve'asisa. The pasuk says, anything that comes out of your mouth, guard and do. All I know is things that you say. Gomer b'libo minayin. How do we know things that are just in your heart also? Tamilomer kol nediv lev. It says that by the donations for the tabernacle, it says kol nediv lev. Anybody who donated from his heart. That even just donate in your heart, deciding to donate was enough. So Shiny also, yeah, but that was different. Kol nediv lev. It specifically says by the Mishkan, kol nediv lev, even in your heart. Okay, but why don't we make a binyanav? Say, okay, just like by the Mishkan, who is kol nediv lev, so also in general, in your heart, it's enough. So Mishum da'avu truma v'kodshim shnei ksuvin abayin kechro, because it also says, talks about your heart, right? It says v'chol nediv lev olis, in the context, says Rashi, in the context of kodshim. And therefore, so we have nediv lev by the truma for the building of the tabernacle. We have nediv lev by kodshim. So the shnei ksuvin abayin ke'echad, right? Those are two specific places where it says this concept, and therefore it's limited to those two specific places. If it's in one place, you can say, okay, that's a binyanav, and from there we'll apply it globally. But when it's in two places, we say, well, it's limited to those two places. It's saying specifically those two places, but nowhere else. And we can't apply a concept from two specific places generally, because if it should be applied generally, it would just be written in one place, and then you can apply it generally. If it's in two places, it's limited to those two places. Well, that makes sense if you hold of that concept, that when you have it in two places, it's only those two places. But if you say that, you could still apply it globally. So what are you going to say? Why don't we should say that heart Shevuos are enough? So have a chulin v'kodshim nikachim lo gaminan. Well, because the donations for the tabernacle as well as kodshim, so those are kodshim things. Whereas we're trying to understand a Shevuah by salad, which is chulin, just regular stuff. We don't learn out chulin from kodshim, and therefore we can't we can't assume that heart Shevuos are a thing. That was daf chavav. Did this end up being a long daf? I feel like this might have did it end up being like around an hour? Wow. Anyways, we learned a lot of stuff. We learned about future Shevuos and past Shevuos and machlokas. Started off with machlokas Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel and Klal Ufrat versus Riboy and Miut, and then other important halachas about, like, for example, a Shevuah ba'ones is not a Shevuah, and right, Shevuah b'mezid is not a Shevuah. We learned about how can you have a scenario, right? We looked at you have to have the Helam Shevuah, not Helam Chayfetz. What does that mean? How can you have a mistaken Shevuah past tense? Well, if you knew that you were lying, but you weren't sure about the korban, Munbaz and the Chachamim, and interesting stuff. Peace out.